I'm Jason Sylvia, and this is the Creative Capital Show. A show about creative people and how those creative people turn into entrepreneurs by taking their creativity and turning it into a business and facing all the trials and tribulations along the way. Martial arts instructor, virologist, motorcycle racer, comic book expert, and last but not least, business owner. These are just some of the ways to describe this episode's guest, Thoney Phanlak, aka the most interesting nerd in the world. That's not an exaggeration. How else would you describe a person whose story begins with a birth in a refugee camp in Thailand that involved the Prince of Laos, who then went on to study and teach martial arts, while also pursuing a career as a virologist that happened to be one of the first test subjects for the COVID-19 vaccine, all the while being a more silent partner in a business that involves comic books, vintage clothing, and other pop culture paraphernalia. Oh, and that business just happened to have one of the biggest trade shows in the Northeast in recent memory. The term jack of all trades, master of none does not apply to Thoney. Instead, he's a jack of many trades, master of many trades. In this episode, Thoney and I discuss how the stress and issues of a 9-to-5 can help you deal with the stress of running your own business, how documentation, instructions, and processes are a foundation for business success, the benefits of working behind the scenes and being a more quiet business partner, and why turning your passion into a business may be right for some, but not for everyone. Enjoy. Thoney Phanlak.
Thoney Phanlak.
So, Vongsi Sampan, Thoney Phanlak, or just Thoney Phanlak.
That works for me too.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, Thoney Phanlak. Perfect.
Thank you
Easier.
for coming on.
Yeah, perfect.
We were joking about this earlier, and my mic just doesn't want to stay in place. I think there's spirits visiting my apartment, but
it's because we were talking about Ghostbusters.
we were a little bit before. If I had a Patreon, I'd put it on there, but I don't think anybody would care. Anyway, I was joking before that if anybody remembers, I'm going to date myself here. If everyone remembers those Most Interesting Man in the World commercials,
Oh man,
I think you might be a pretty damn good replacement or like stand in for a new generation. I mean, that guy's got some wrinkles, seen some miles. I think we need to let him ride off into the sunset. maybe introduce you
that would be
in
pretty
there.
cool, right?
That'd be, yeah, like I'm just, hey, what was that? Dos Equis? Yeah, Dos Equis, give us a call.
Yes.
Give oh, not us, give Thoney a call. I'll take a couple of percentage points just because I came up with the idea.
Definitely.
But yeah, give us a call. Get Thoney to be in there, especially after you listen to this episode, because I think you'd be in the running for it.
Thanks.
So, because you're doing multiple things. You're a nerd.
I am.
You're a fellow nerd like me.
Absolutely.
But you're also a martial arts teacher, so you're a badass.
I guess
you
so.
ride motorcycles.
Yes.
You're also you're also like not just a like cultural like comic booky nerd, but you're also a like smart nerd in the sense that you are a medical lab scientist working in virology.
I am. Well, like virology, bacteriology, like that's the science background.
Yeah,
is where
you were one of the first to take the COVID-19 vaccine as like a test subject.
Yes, I was one of the first 40,000 people in the world to do it.
Yeah. So like no big deal.
No
and
big
then you're also a small business owner.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so like again, most interesting person in the world, people. So we're gonna get into all of that because I think it's an interesting mix of things.
Yes.
And this episode, just for anybody listening, if you're listening to this show, thank you. But I think there's been a lot of people on the show where they've gone full bore into the business because it was their passion, etc., which is great. I want to highlight those stories. But for you, I think it's a little bit different because you took a different path where you're doing multiple things and you're also got like the quote unquote 9-to-5, which it seems like you're passionate about, then something else that you're passionate about, which is not bringing in a revenue stream, and another thing where that is bringing in a revenue stream. So we're going to get into all that because I think balancing all that or just like that being an option, I don't think it's highlighted enough. And on this show, I like to highlight the creative and the business, whether it's unconventional or conventional. So what I want to first start off speaking with unconventional is how how you got to America, how you got to this country, because there's a story there in that your parents and the Prince of Laos
Yes, that's correct.
ended up in a refugee camp in Thailand.
Yes.
Right before you were born. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Let's talk about this. So, like you stated, my parents left during the Vietnam War. They're from Laos, and basically one day my mom was like, "You know what? I'm leaving." She told my dad, if you want to come with me, great. But if not, I'm going to the United States. And then they basically uprooted and then crossed over the Mekong River with a group. And they ended up getting captured when they crossed over to Thailand. And, they got thrown in jail, which is pretty wild. And luckily, when they got thrown in jail, one of the princes of Laos, he was, in the group, and he told the people who was, in charge, were like, you got to let these people go. They were the ones that helped me, escape the country, basically. And instead of throwing them all back to Laos, they all ended up in a refugee camp. And my parents, wanted their firstborn to be born in the United States, but unfortunately, due to paperwork and, the lack of sponsors, it took them about 3 years to finally get a sponsor. And then, towards the end of their, time there, I was born April 4th, 1985, in a beautiful refugee camp in Thailand.
So you can technically never be president.
No, I cannot.
As much as I think, again, the most interesting man in the world candidate should be president, that can't happen.
Yeah, that definitely can't happen for me, unfortunately.
So your early life, you're growing up here, and I think did your parents end up in Woonsocket, Rhode Island? Was that the first place they came to, or in America, or was there or was it another city, and then you settled down in Woonsocket or something like that?
So my parents ended up getting sponsored by a Christian family in Texas, San Antonio, Texas. So they ended up there. We lived there for only a couple months, and then my mom found out that her brother was up in the Northeast. And when she got in contact with him, he was like, "Hey, move up here." And once they moved up, to Woonsocket, Rhode Island, basically, I've been here almost all my life after that.
And so, with that early life, I want to. This is a quote I heard doing my research. When you were young, you were considered a tiger child.
Yes.
Can you explain what that means?
They called me Buksua. Buksua is tiger child because I had a pretty bad temper as a child. Would throw temper tantrums and get mad, and when I'd be upset, I'd just stand there and grit my teeth and just go, "Arr!" And then my mom would just laugh because she sees this little child just throwing these tantrums, and it's like, what's wrong with this kid?
Is that what led to your parents sending to a Buddhist temple camp, or to stay there or something like that?
Yeah, when I was a early teen, they would send me to the Buddhist temple in North Smithfield to basically try to learn how to control my energy, my anger, or whatever ailments I guess they thought I had, which is I just had a lot of energy that I just didn't know how to basically disperse.
And is that so? At that time, were you already because this is a big part of your life, were you already training in martial arts at that time, or did that lead you to?
At that time, I was already training in martial arts because they threw me in martial arts when I was 5 or 6.
Now, is that because of the tiger child temper tantrum?
That was because of that, and I just wanted to do it as well because growing up watching martial arts films, one of my early films I've ever watched was Enter the Dragon, and I was always fascinated with martial arts and Bruce Lee. And, at that time, there was no MMA schools, there was no Muay Thai schools or anything, and there was just Kempo Karate around my area. And they threw me in there, and,
That was going to be my next question, what drew you to, because I think it's interesting now, there's, access to so many different styles where, you can, there's, I think there's online training, which I don't know exactly how you do that. With online, I think one of those things you need to be in person. But anyway, there's so many different accesses, styles that, somebody can learn how to fight. And there's probably, I'm assuming as somebody who's not in the martial arts world, probably a lot of arguments as to like which one's the better style, and that seems like that must have been going on from the beginning of time. I mean, like I know UFC was supposed to like settle that, but then there's changes, and now it's like a multi-million-dollar business. So it's like, did that really settle it? So Kempo karate was the thing you had access to, and that's what you started training in. That going to the Buddhist temple, did learning martial arts, did that kind of quell the emotions and like learn how to control them, or was it more like an outlet? Was it a little bit A, a little bit of B?
It was more of an outlet, to be honest. I had I always had a lot of energy, and it would help out with some of my temper tantrums, and they did notice that I became a more well behaved child as they saw me progress through the ranks in Kempo karate, and they realized too that, hey, maybe this kid is actually good at it. And, me growing up doing the martial arts, I wasn't sure if I was good at it because I was just kind of training and just doing my thing. And I just thought it was fun. And then it wasn't until later on in life that, people actually noticed that my skill set is actually pretty good.
So what I find interesting about that, just that statement, right, is because you're training Kempo karate, which I think does use like the belt system, right? Like
it does.
White belt, yellow belt. So even was that not much of an indicator for you, at least when you were training? Like, oh, he progressed to the next thing, like, because I know that's not like present in all martial arts. Like,
correct.
I mean, like not everyone has like a ranking system, so to speak. It's
correct.
Like, hey, you're good if you beat the opponent.
Yeah, I guess for me, it wasn't a good indicator, as in like improving or I guess going up in levels in the rank. It wasn't a good indicator for me to whether or not I was good, because I saw upper ranks who maybe outranked me by like 4 different levels. But when we would like spar, I would totally destroy them. And this is me as a little kid. And that's when I was like, you know what? Maybe belts really don't matter.
So I think that, so did that teach you a lesson? Because I think this will go into later on in the conversation. See, folks, not every question I have is planned. I have a lot of planned questions, but not all of them. But I think that like an interesting thing that it brings up, did being in the martial arts and then seeing like having that experience of like, oh, like these people are like, from a technical standpoint, like supposed to be this many levels above me, but you'd go like, then like the actual like skill sets had to come out and then you would beat them.
Yes.
Did that teach you early on in life that like, yeah, rankings can be like an indicator, but it's not the indicator. And just because somebody is like earned, like, I'm doing air quotes, people. I'm not saying these people didn't earn it, but like in business and in other things in life, did that teach you like, oh, just because somebody has a title, like the title only does so much. It's like really the person behind the title.
Absolutely. It comes down to the individual. They can wear whatever title they want on their foreheads, but when it comes down to it, if they can't perform, it doesn't matter what title you have.
Yeah, it's like when it's time to actually like put up or show up and like show the skills and like apply them. It's a whole different thing than like the in practice versus the in theory.
Correct.
So like that. So seeing that at a young age must have given you a lot of confidence, but it also must have affected you. Like, oh, because I think people see that more as adults, and like it takes a while. Like when you get into the adult, and then you see this kind of BS. But like seeing that at a younger age, I wonder if like how much did that change your perspective, even going into adulthood, of like, yeah, it's great, but like, how are you actually applying it?
Yeah, because as I came up in the ranks in Kempo karate, I set a goal where, yes, I probably had a better skill set than a lot of people, but once I get my black belt, I told myself that I was going to try to research other arts after that, because, I even thought about quitting just to try out other things like boxing and other sports. But my dad was like, you have to finish, get your black belt, and then, go do something else. And that's what I did.
So this leads into a couple of things. One, because you got your black belt at 18.
Yes.
Is that like abnormal, or is that like normal?
Well, it depends.
If you like train hard enough, you know what I mean? Like if you have the time. So I wonder, is it like a time thing where it's just like, hey, when you're 18, have like a job and responsibilities, or maybe you have like a summer job or something, you can have time to go do that?
Well, there are some schools that give out black belts in 2 years. So I mean, that's a whole other thing too.
I was gonna say, like, probably depends on the school and like things like that.
But with my school, I started as a kid, and I came up, through the ranks as a kid. But when I was testing for my black belt, I wanted the adult black belt. So basically, as you come up in the ranks as a kid, you have the kids program. You have a certain amount of techniques and forms. Basically, more of it's a smaller list of techniques that you need to learn. But when you transition to the adult program, you have to learn the entire system. And that's the black belt I wanted. So it actually took me a little longer. I started when I was 5 or 6. I didn't get my black belt until I was 18. That's a long time, to basically be training in one art and to finally, get a black belt. Most places, people probably can get their black belts between 4 to 5 years, depending on the art.
Now, I know you said you wanted to go study and learn other forms. What made you want to do that versus because even in anything, some people want to be specialized and really honed in.
Yes.
Which has its benefits and drawbacks. And then some people want to go, just have more tools in the toolbox, which has its benefits. But then again, it's like I hate the saying, but it's like, jack of all trades, master of none type of situation, right? So what, besides what you already said, was there any other factors that, hey, I don't want to hone in on this one thing, I want to expand outward?
That was, one of the big factors is probably Bruce Lee. He was the one that kind of came up with the idea that not one style has all the answers. So, that's when he started to develop his Jeet Kune Do. And for me, just reading articles on Bruce Lee, reading, different things on Black Belt magazine, his philosophies on, what combat should really be. That's kind of what kind of segued or, forced me to kind of look elsewhere, because, to be honed in or pigeonholed to one style can really limit someone's ability to fight.
And I want to hold on to that sentiment because a couple questions about that, but I think I'm really I think what you're learning here, what you're talking about here, has probably influenced your personal life and your business life.
It has.
And I want to tie that in because I think that's where the real value of this conversation is coming from, and I can already kind of see it coming out. So speaking of Jeet Kune Do, you got into that when you went to URI.
Yes,
and
URI.
when you were dating a girl, a lot of, and I'm only saying that because there's been other episodes that I can reference where people were doing something because they followed the love of their life for somebody they were dating. So I think it's funny that yet another example, I'm dating somebody and then it led to this thing.
Yes. So I was dating a girl at this time, and at URI, I believe it was my sophomore year or the second semester of freshman year. I can't remember exactly the timeline, but I was dating this one girl. We just had a dinner, at the Union, and we just so happened to be walking around, and I looked into one of the rooms in the Union and saw a group training, and they were doing sensitivity drills or hand speed drills. They looked like Wing Chun drills. And I stuck my head in, and at the time it was, this handsome looking guy, really athletic build, and I call him handsome because I always joke around because he's my first Jeet Kune Do instructor, and all the girls always Googled and gagaed over him. And so basically, I stuck my head in, and I was like, "Hey, you guys training in here?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "What is this?" He was like, "Oh, Jeet Kune Do." I'm like, "Bruce Lee?" He's like, "Yes." I was like, "Oh my god!" I was trying to find a Jeet Kune Do place to to study before. I didn't even know it was available in Rhode Island because at the town that we live in, it was just karate. And, this is, again, college was kind of like that gateway to everything in life,
And so that gateway part, definitely want to hold on to that too. Parking lot that for a second. Jeet Kune Do, can you explain? Because I think there's a differentiation here.
Yes.
Even in my limited knowledge of just martial arts in general, but Jeet Kune Do is one thing, and then Junfan Gung Fu, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. They're connected, but they're also one is one thing. One is a system of doing things, and then one is the actual practice or the movements and whatnot. Can you just explain that separation?
Yeah,
just
sure.
That way when we go further in the conversation, there's not confusion or anything.
Yeah, so Junfan Kung Fu is basically the Kung Fu style that Bruce Lee developed when he came into the United States. He started to modify Wing Chun because he realized that Wing Chun, some of the stances may be not as great for combat. So he decided to modify Wing Chun, a traditional Wing Chun, to what was called Junfan Kung Fu. And then from Junfan Kung Fu, he even modified it even more and liberated the art and turned it into Jeet Kune Do, which is the way of the intercepting fist. So Bruce wanted to come up with a style that wasn't confined to one style, and not one that's not limited to just one way. That's basically what Jeet Kune Do is.
And so now, tying this together a little bit, so you're learning that, you're studying that, and how did that help you in your personal life? Because I would think that the idea of like, hey, there's not just one way of doing things. Like, hey, like it's like you don't have to, like, if you want to, great, go specialize in something, but like specializing in one area, when you have to go outside of that area, then what do you do, right? And I don't think that's just martial arts. I think that's like life, it's business. Like I came from the tech world, and it's like, hey, if you specialize in one, like, one area of expertise, if that thing goes obsolete, then what do you do, right?
Yes.
So sometimes it's better to be an inch deep and a mile wide than the other way around. Did that teach you that, or like, I guess in the earlier years, like the college years, the earlier years of your life, that's like, oh, there's benefits to being open, being receptive, taking a little, like having a mix, like taking little pieces from the here and there, like what works for you? Because correct me if I'm wrong, like, I think I heard it from an interview you did, where it was like, there's arguments in the Jeet Kune Do community on what's supposed to be the right way, which makes no sense to me, because the whole idea of Jeet Kune Do is there is no right way. So like, why are you even arguing about that? Which that seems to be a contradiction. But but like, I think it's because certain people got certain information because it was customized to them.
Yes, it was tailor made for each student that Bruce Lee would teach. He would teach them based on their attributes, and also based on where Bruce Lee was at, that point in his life, because Jeet Kune Do was different in, the 60s, the mid 60s, the late 60s, the early 70s. Like it kept changing and progressing.
So I would think they would have to, because like the whole idea is like adapting and changing and taking what's best for like the time given, correct?
Yes.
So how did that help you in your life? Because I think that's like, there's like a valuable lesson there, even for people in business. It's like there is something in like putting your head down and working towards a goal, and like having a goal and things like that. But I think sometimes people get so caught up in the goal, or like caught up in like the business they think they want to do, they could be missing out on something that they are potentially good at, because they're not willing to just like step back for a minute and like take a look at everything and going like, I could be like, like a stubborn bull and I'm going this way, but like if I would just maybe modify things a little bit, the returns on that could be exponential, but they're not willing to. So do you think that helped you like teach those lessons to you from early on? Like, hey, be willing, and like, the idea of flow like water and like things like that?
Definitely. It absolutely helped me with, just college and even just life in general, because it forced me to adapt in whatever kind of situation that you're in, whether it's, something with finances, whether it's something with your grades, whether it's, just finding time to, have enough time to study, to get ready for exams, especially when I was in college, because it really taught you how to adapt to really crazy situations and quickly on the go, on the fly. Like that's really what Jeet Kune Do and martial arts in general has helped me with my, everyday life.
How do you think it helped you? And because we're going to go into like the actual small business you own later, but like, how do you think it helped you just from like a business mindset?
From a business mindset, it allowed me to adapt when things didn't go right the first way. And then it would just force me, all right, so if we had a closed door here, let's just look elsewhere, find another route.
Because I think what people don't realize about running a business, and I want to quote Gary Vaynerchuk, he was saying as like a CEO, and like whether you're CEO of a big company or whether you're running a small business, you're basically putting out fires a lot. You are a firefighter. like there is a part of like you like actually making the product or doing the thing, but like besides that, you're putting out fires all day. And I think the bigger the business, the more fires you have to put out.
Absolutely.
So I wonder, like, that must have been like such good preparation to be able to like to adapt and be like, so do you think like you'd be able to be as good of a firefighter when it comes to business had you had not studied like Jeet Kune Do?
Probably not. I'm going to be honest with you, because the studying of Jeet Kune Do has really allowed me to really keep my cool in really bad situations. And, even in my, my 9 to 5 right now, when things go wrong, my employees they notice that, my nerves are always really chill. I never panic, and I always go, all right, well, if this is what, so-and-so wants, this is what we need to do. and then I'll show them exactly the steps that's needed for them to succeed.
And we're going to get into the 9 to 5 in just a little bit because not only are you a martial arts practitioner, you also teach it.
I do, yes.
When did you start teaching?
I started teaching, when I got my first black belt, when I got my first black belt, I started teaching for probably a year after that. So when I was 18, 19, that's when I started teaching martial arts.
Were you teaching, I'm guessing you weren't teaching Jeet Kune Do?
Not at that time.
Because you studied that in college,
Correct.
But you were teaching
Kempo karate. Yep, at Parker's Kempo karate.
And so what did, because I think it's interesting when somebody's like a practitioner of something and somebody can do something, but like it's a whole, and I kind of had to, in my corporate 9 to 5, the one that I left, funny enough, I ended up working in training because I was somewhat good at it, but it's a whole different experience of like, you can do a thing and you could do it exceptionally well.
Yes.
But then when somebody asks you to teach it, that's a whole different ballgame, because then you have to like rethink and put yourself in the position of like somebody who knows nothing. It's like, well, how do I get them from like knowing nothing to like being a practitioner? Maybe not on my level because like they'd have to catch up, but at least proficient enough that they can like do it and do it well.
I mean, it really forces you to slow down and, basically try to bring it down to an elementary level, if you want to think of it that way. So if you want to think of a black belt as like a PhD, MD level, you have to bring it down to like a kindergarten level, because if no one has any experience, with any kind of movements with combat, it's going to be pretty tough for them to just be like, oh, if I go, all right, throw a punch. And then they're just going to be like, how do I throw a punch? And then you have to break it down. So, you start from basically the bottom up stance, and then, body position, hand position, even head position when you're throwing those strikes.
Did it, as you started teaching, was that, I don't want to say overwhelming, but was it kind of like, oh shit, like I am now responsible for this person being proficient in this thing?
Yes.
That was like another thing, like when I was like having to make training materials and stuff, like, oh, like come teach this boot camp class. And I'm like, oh shit, like if they don't get it, it's on me.
Yes.
Like I can't blame them. I can't be like, you're an idiot. Like, no, well, I'm the idiot who taught you that. So if you're an idiot in that thing, it's my fucking fault.
It definitely was eye-opening. I still remember trying to teach my first class, and I was like, oh, I got this. And then when class started, I'm like, oh no, this is much harder than I thought.
Now, see, if you had done the Jeet Kune Do beforehand, you wouldn't have freaked out.
I probably would not have freaked out, right? But the thing is, you would think that I would be okay with it. I only knew one style at that time.
So what did, and again, because I think this is good early on so that later in the conversation we can really tie this all, but like what did that teach you, just like Jeet Kune Do taught you to be calm and to be a firefighter, which came in handy when you started running your own small business. What did the act of did teaching make you evaluate how you learned, like, and how you did things? Because then it's like, because it makes you, it's like, oh wait, I'm teaching it this way. It's like, oh wait, is that technically correct? Like, did that make you reevaluate the way you were doing things?
It did, because it made me realize that some of those natural abilities and attributes that I was given. I mean, I was just naturally fast. I was always good with body mechanics, but I think that was just from mimicking people I saw on TV. Some of my heroes on TV, I guess. But the thing is, like, you realize that some people don't have those same abilities, so you have to adjust the way that you teach. Also, just like you also learn that some students are able to pick up things faster than others, so you have to learn how to be patient as well. And it also taught me to be prepared before a class starts. You can't just wing a class.
No.
When you first start.
No.
You cannot. You got to do the prep work. So when I first started teaching, I thought, oh, I got this. I'm just going to run class like, oh, wait a minute. How does class run now? And then your mind just goes blank at that time, if you're not prepared.
I also wonder, did it, and I want to just see if this ties in. So like, because when anybody runs a business, right, it's one thing when it's yourself or like you and one other person, but then when you start hiring employees, you then have to, in my humble opinion, feel free to correct me, you have to then like start turning certain things into processes.
You do.
So you can hand them off to somebody, and that anybody that you hire, not just like any random person, but like whoever you hired, because like they're not going to be you. They're not going to have the exact same skills. They might have similar skill sets, and like maybe that's why you hired them, but they're not going to have the exact same skill sets, nor they have the exact same experience with the business because you just hired them. So did the act of teaching and having to teach a class and being prepared and like did that help with in running the business that you run? Which I swear we're gonna get to it, people. It's all gonna make sense. We're just this is the build up. Did that teach you about the act of like, oh, this thing I do, I now have to teach somebody else in this business. I should probably write it down and make a process out of it so that way it could be taught to anybody else when I hire them, so that way they can go off and do that thing while I go run the business and or put out the fires.
Yeah. It definitely forced me to kind of think of it from the business aspect as well, because you're right. Because if you're just one person doing it, it's all in your head and, you're fine. But when you do hire someone, now you have to write down steps. Like, what exactly do I do? It really forces you to, to kind of like think of all the possible scenarios that can potentially go wrong. Because, also I'm going to bring this back to my 9 to 5 too. When we do things in the lab, just like you said, you have to write everything down, step by step. And when you write things down step by step, sometimes you forget like minor things, like little things, And, even in business, sometimes you think that you mention things and you kind of assume that people would know certain things, but sometimes 9 times out of 10, they don't. And, it's not their fault. It's just, it's just because my business partner and I, we've been doing things, together alone, and, we know how we work together. But if we hire someone on board new, we have to kind of like go all the way back to the beginning. It's like, all right, this is how we do things. And, we have to write down things step by step.
And so, speaking of, actually, before I go into that question, sorry, writing things down step by step, also, did that teach you like just documenting something? Like putting something down on paper can change your perception of it. Like when it comes to like something like budgeting, like, oh, like where's the money in this business going? But then when you start writing down and documenting every single penny, and then you're looking at it, you're like, oh,
absolutely. Now you know.
Oh, now you know. Or whether it's like even something like, like diet, like when you start like actually tracking stuff and documenting stuff.
Very important.
Then it's like, oh, so like did teaching help you do that too? Where it's like, okay, I have to make everything a process and write it down. So documenting things, did that change your perspective as well? Like I'm guessing like when you were teaching, you had to document like how each student was progressing and like where they were at. And then like you're kind of seeing it from that high level view. It's like, oh, okay, like maybe I have to modify or adjust things.
Yes, it definitely forced me to really take into what minor things that people need to work on to get better at like the bigger picture stuff. So a lot of it comes down to foundations, just with anything in business, martial arts, or any kind of processes, like even in the lab. If you have great foundations and you kind of make a checklist of what you consider are good foundations, it just becomes easier for you to write down like these processes for people, and then they get it immediately. That's, obviously if they have a good, foundation of what you consider, good for science, good for business, or good for martial arts,
All right. So speaking of teaching, because you were teaching, in the physical sense with martial arts, but then moving from the body to the mind now, you are also teaching physics and chemistry, which this does lead to the 9 to 5 you have.
Yes.
So as you're doing all these other things, and I don't think we're going to get into it, but also riding motorcycles as well. Man. So just being that kind of badass.
So many things.
Again, most interesting man in the world, ladies and gentlemen. You were then just like, were you just like super studying in the books? Were you just naturally smart and to the point where you're like, yeah, I'm just going to teach physics and chemistry? And when were you teaching it? Like high school or something like that?
I was teaching physics, tutoring physics in college. You're right.
Okay.
My friends would struggle with physics 101 and 102, and they found out that I did well in it, so they got in touch with me and asked them to basically help them with their equations and just trying to solve problems. And for some reason, physics and chemistry, for some reason in college, I picked up quickly. I had a really good. This kind of goes back to high school as well. Had a really good physics teacher in high school, had a really good chemistry teacher in high school. So that probably laid the groundwork for how successful I was in college, with sciences.
And so, did you always want to pursue the sciences even from like a young age? Or was that just like something like did the parents push you into that a little bit?
That was definitely my parents.
Okay.
I was an art student in high school. I was in the gifted art program. I wanted to do computer art, design video games, and make my own, superhero characters. But my parents are like, no, you're going to college, you're going to get a real job, and you're going to become a doctor. I'm like, oh, come on, why?
Now, did you feel that you had to do that because I think this is an interesting thing too with people like who go into like their own businesses or they start doing other stuff. It's like, hey, the parents wanted to push me into one thing, I pursued it, but then it wasn't fulfilling. But it seemed like you pursue that thing, and it seems like it's fulfilling. You're still doing it. It doesn't seem like you hate it.
No, I definitely don't hate
it. So that's interesting. Like, you didn't want to do it. You started studying it, and then was it at first just to please the parents? But then you're like, oh, I'm good at this, or like, how did you find? Because usually it's like I hear like that story gets repeated where it's like I hated it so much, it's like I needed to break out, or like people just end up hating it, and then there's like resentment. But that didn't happen with you, which I feel like is interesting.
I did always have an interest in the sciences. I mean, it's kind of funny because you can kind of blame it on Resident Evil 2. A video game, right?
I love how the nerdy thing is like what got you into the sciences, which I think these ghosts are working. The mic almost fell on me.
Your mic hit you in the face.
Yeah, it really did. It really did. I think Resident Evil, there's a zombie ghost.
There's something going on right now.
Yeah, there really is.
Oh yeah, so Resident Evil 2, out of all things, to kind of influence my science track, right? My friend Nicone, he went to high school together, went to middle school together. I went over his house one day, and he had this game, Resident Evil 2. I didn't have a PlayStation at the time, and he was like, "Hey, I got this really crazy game. Do you want to play it for me?" I'm like, "Play it for you? Why?" He's like, "Because it's scary." I was like, "Okay." So I logged on, played, the game. It was about zombies and viruses. I was like, wow, this is fascinating. And then as you progress through the game, you learn about viruses and, what caused the zombie outbreak. And I was like, this is really interesting. So that kind of stayed in the back of my mind for a little bit. And, I think that was the catalyst of why I was fascinated with, microbes.
I was going to say I think this is a perfect leading story. Is that what made you, because, you're teaching physics and chemistry, you're tutoring it. In college, is that what made you specifically pursue the medical field? Because I know your parents were like, you're going to be a doctor. And it's like, okay, but then you didn't end up becoming like a doctor in the sense that we think of, but more you pursued virology.
Yes.
Was that just that nerdy like Resident Evil 2 thing?
It was. Honestly,
see, moms and dads, nerdy stuff can help.
It really was just the nerdy stuff. Because my father, in Laos and Thailand, he was a doctor. So that's one of the reasons why they wanted me to become a doctor, because, it's like the family thing. Yep. And,
it's the family business.
It's a family business. And what's more stereotypical than a freaking Asian American doctor, right?
I was going to make a weird King of the Hill reference, but I don't know if everybody would get it.
With Khan?
Yeah, well, I mean, because Khan wasn't a doctor.
No, he wasn't.
And then people could be so confused
Khan
what
Jr.
the hell we're referencing. Yeah, Khan Jr. We don't know what happened, but the King of the Hill reboot or continuation or whatever is going to be coming out, so maybe we'll find out. And then Bobby was going to be a spiritual leader. Like, he ended up being it, but then they don't confirm it.
That's amazing.
He ends up being like the Lama Sunglug, and I'm like, of all people, Bobby. Actually, that makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense, man. That shows.
That dude's super chill. Like, he's super chill all the time.
Yeah.
Unless there's fruit pies involved. Then
that's it. It's a wrap.
It's a wrap. Then he'll fight you for it. But,
oh, man.
But anyway.
A little bit of a tangent there.
Feel free to skip 30 seconds, people, so you don't have to sit through the King of the Hill stuff.
Oh wow, God,
these ghosts are... I'm
getting
hit by this mic. I don't know what I did.
You gotta work on your head movement.
I'll teach you after.
Yeah,
exactly. Listen, we're gonna start a podcast just like riffing on nerd culture after this, and then if any nerds want to get violent, I'm just gonna send you after them.
Let's go.
Yeah, let's do it. But so the doctor thing was the family business, but then like besides the Resident Evil 2 thing, what else like led you into wanting to study virology? Because like as far as things being specialized, that is we were talking about not being specialized. Yeah. That is a very specialized field.
It is. What fascinated me is because you can't see these things like with your naked eye. You have to basically look underneath a microscope to actually see these organisms, and these things rule the world. To be quite honest, I mean, look what happened the past couple of years. Like, it shut down the entire world for like 2 years.
I mean, I definitely agree with that. I would hope that anybody listening with this would agree with that. But apparently, not to get political, there's a lot of people that think this is all made up and it doesn't actually exist. It does.
It does.
Yeah. Before anybody gets at me, no, this is not a plant thing. Like, this is not like not a plant thing. I should say not a planted thing. I didn't invite. Like, we're past the point of like COVID being on the rise. Yeah. So if anybody's like, you gotta be like, no. And you're somebody who's been on the front lines of it.
Yes, literally on the front lines.
Because you're one of the first people the first 40,000 people to get. What was that like? Like, because you were studying virology.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna go into what you what you did after the studying, but I just want a brief aside because we're talking about this. Like, what was that like? Just being like, hey, we have like, there's this virus going around. It's like it's affecting people. It's shutting down the economy. We got this vaccine. It's experimental.
Definitely experimental.
And then just like you want to try it, and you're just like, no, I'm good.
Yeah, sure.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it sounds great. Yeah.
Can you walk through that process a little bit before we go back into like you studying virology?
Oh man, that entire process it kind of just happened, kind of like on a whim, I guess. It was an email that went out to, at the time I was working at Boston Medical Center, and an email went out asking people, hey, there's potential for a vaccine study. Is anyone interested? And I was like, ooh, like, does this mean that I could, potentially help out mankind in some weird sort of way? Or even just my own selfish, personal gain. Hey, I can be the first one vaccinated. I can do whatever I want. So that's the other side of it too, to be quite honest.
I don't think it was that South Park episode where all like the old people get vaccinated so they can do whatever they want. It's like a nightclub kind of thing.
Yeah, honestly, that was on the back of my mind too, because yes, I can help out people, and oh my god, I can walk around freely without having to worry about getting infected. And again, it was just an email, and I was like, you know what, this sounds like a great idea. Might be stupid because who the hell knows what they're putting in my body. And, I signed up, I went through the health screening thing, and they were like, you know what, you're a good candidate. And out of the entire, I think, department, only myself and the director of the lab signed up for the drug or the vaccine. And, after we finished our health screening process, they, brought us in, got some blood work done, inoculated us with a vial of whatever compound it was. They didn't even call it anything. They get compound, let's say 1, 2, 3. And they didn't tell you at the time whether it was placebo or if it was the vaccine or not.
This oddly enough sounds like the beginning of like insert Resident Evil game here. Like this is always sounds like this. Like, and then something experimental comes in, and then something goes wrong, like crazy shit happens.
So I mean, it does kind of remind me of it. And I actually really thought about that too, because I was like, oh man, this is kind of like how the zombie apocalypse started in Resident Evil.
But then you might get superpowers.
It's true.
Like that's the other flip side. Like you may get superpowers.
Yeah, the funny thing is, after I got the vaccine that week, I ended up doing PR with my deadlifts. I was able to deadlift 410 pounds twice, but that's a lot for someone my size.
So you got superpowers temporarily.
Yeah, it did work, right?
It was you know what, you got Compound V.
Yeah, that's
the
what
boys
it was.
reference. It was temporary. It was 1 hour Compound V.
It was just that. Yeah, no weird side effects. I didn't throw up any green bile or anything, right?
Or you didn't have like the black stuff coming out of your ears. Anybody listening to like, what? Like if they're not nerdy stuff, like what the hell are these two
guys talking about?
Don't worry, it's all gonna make sense. We're getting to it.
We're
people.
Getting there.
So that's an insane experience. And you're studying virology. You're tutoring. So not only are you a martial arts badass, you're also smart to go into virology, a very specialized field. Reasons being family, and then also getting interested because the nerdy side of you and zombie apocalypse movies and Resident Evil and things of that nature. So when you're studying virology, then after that you got an internship with Rhode Island Hospital.
Yes, I did.
Where you did some it seemed like some innovative work with like TB, like tuberculosis and stuff.
So I, with the help of one of my mentors, Linda Binns, and myself, and everyone else in the lab, we basically came up with the first PCR test for tuberculosis in the state of Rhode Island. So what that means is, instead of 6 weeks of testing, 6 weeks of testing to determine whether or not you have TB, we can determine the presence of a TB infection within 2 hours. So 2 hours versus 6 weeks. That's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, it's a huge difference as far as time and things of that nature.
Isolation, treatment, and all that.
And so was that something that like you set that out to do that in your internship, or is that just like the internship happened first and then you're like, oh, this is something interesting I could do while here doing this internship?
The internship happened, and then the testing for the TB PCR test didn't come about until a few years after I got into my career. My mentor was already kind of getting things, in the works to basically start the validation. And, obviously in sciences, you got to collect data points and make sure you have the right samples, so positive and negative controls. I know that's really what we do in science, guys. Anyways, So, she gathered all the samples for us, and then, she ended up retiring. But, I ended up taking over the lab. And basically what I did was with the help of the microbiology director and myself, we partnered up with this company, Cepheid, and, we basically, validated some, samples, and I wrote the protocol. I helped the Department of Health, with some of their samples as well. And, that's how I came about doing the testing.
Now, can you, that was part of your internship and everything. So like, that's a pretty big accomplishment right there. So what was like the first job that you landed like from this study of virology?
I got a job immediately during my internship. They already offered me a job even before I finished graduating.
And so, what was the job title, and also what is the day-to-day of that job? Because I think like people sometimes when they think about like dealing with viruses, they think of like the Resident Evils or like movies like Outbreak and stuff, where it's just
it's
like
not like that.
It's like Outbreak. It's just like the military's coming in. It's like, all right, give us the control. It's like, well, sir, I'm like crunching the number, and like it's like I don't think it's like it's like when people think like people who work in IT and like hackers are like what they see, and I'm like, that's not.
You're always on the mainframe.
Yeah,
I'm
gonna hack the mainframe.
Yeah.
No, there is such thing as a mainframe.
Okay.
But it's totally different than what people think.
It's not like this network of computers.
I mean, it is and it isn't. Like, it's a whole. It depends on the types of compute. It's a whole different conversation. We're not going to get into. We've done enough tangents already.
We have.
But like, so what is the job title, and what is your day to day of like what you actually do? Just kind of to dispel, what people like think. Yeah.
So my job title was medical lab scientist. So basically, whenever you get any lab testing done from, like getting a physical or any kind of like illness that you potentially can go into your doctor's office for, or your primary, you collect samples, whether it's blood, throat swabs, nose swabs, whatever comes out of your body, basically. If it's something that they think could potentially be an infection, they send it to the lab, and then we see what grows. You literally take, like, say if it's a piece of tissue that they cut off, we actually grind up the tissue, put it onto different media, inoculate different tubes, and see if there's any kind of pathogens that's growing. At least that's part of in the microbiology biology lab.
Documentation, instructions, processes. I get it. These things aren't particularly sexy when it comes to being an entrepreneur, but they are important if you want to be successful. It's one thing when you have your entire business in your head, but what happens when you have to hire and train an employee? What happens when that employee has to train another employee? Or worse, what happens to your business if you get sick for an extended period of time? In both martial arts and science, Thoney was teaching others, and through teaching others, Thoney learned the importance of documentation, tracking progress towards a goal over time, and identifying and fixing gaps within a process. Like the saying goes, the devil is in the details, and if that's the case, documentation, instructions, and processes are the weapons you will need to slay that devil. We're finally getting to the good part, people. Not to say this other parts weren't good, but we're finally going to get into the business part. But I think to go into, before we go into that, I just want to ask, you being a virologist, that being the quote unquote 9 to 5, right? Just like having to teach people in the martial arts, and probably with the tutoring people in physics and chemistry, just like being willing to adapt helped with like business as well. Were there things specifically in dealing with virology that helped you with business, whether it's like constantly A/B testing and seeing the results and then having to modify a little bit, trying to get to a specified goal? I wonder how much that helped, because I'm guessing like in business, like you have to do a lot of like, or at least you maybe should be doing a lot of testing depending on the business of like, okay, we're going to test this out. This worked great. Like, okay, now we're going to test it against something else. Did that work? No. Okay. Why? Let's go back and test it against something else. Mm-hmm. Did that influence, like you're working 9 to 5? Did you keep it, or do you purposefully keep it separate from the business that we're going to talk about that you run? or were there influences that were direct? Were you taking businesses, like processes that you were doing in the lab over to the business, or were you trying to keep them separate? Because I think that's an interesting question too, because sometimes people keep it separate. Sometimes people like how they bleed into each other.
Yeah, actually, the funny thing, the way you word that is sometimes I keep it separate. Sometimes it does melt together. So it all depends on the situation, to be honest. So the way that it kind of melts together is, when like you said, when you're in the lab, you're running different tests. When you run a business, you don't know whether something is going to go well or not. So it's almost like you got to throw these like little experimental things, right? So we gotta like, all right, let's see if people would like this, say like shirt or product design. Let's see how many sales we get here before we go, all out and then mass produce, a bunch of shirts like just this one style.
Yeah.
So you gotta kind of like get like a read on how the market is or what your potential customers or clients want in terms of whether it's a product for a shirt, a comic, it like artwork, like it really all depends.
And also, I wonder if like dealing with virology, like you're dealing with like potentially deadly diseases.
Yes.
And like what you're doing is like helping people out. And it could like mean the difference between people living and dying. Does dealing with that gravity on 9 to 5 basics? I always wonder like when people work in like dangerous jobs and then they go like maybe do their side hustle or another business. I wonder if like the other business is just easier mentally, or is it harder because like you have to deal with that, which is like such a heavy psychological thing. And like, so like when you don't have to deal with that and it's just like a business that's just like, this can make money or not. And maybe it may quote unquote ruin your life financially, but it's like, you're not going to die from it.
It kind of feeds my soul to kind of put it in a cliche kind of way, because you're right. Because when we're dealing with patients' lives, it does kind of wear on you psychologically, because especially if you're following a patient, you recognize the name, and then all of a sudden, you don't see that name anymore.
And you're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, you're like, oh, shit. And
like,
then
that was a person with like a family, like possibly like a family or a family that they were like the crux of, and like, and then hopes and dreams, and then like it's gone.
Yeah. And you get like next thing you know, you get a positive result. You look up the patient's information because you're getting ready to call the floor with the critical result. And then you see the little pop-up on the screen that says patient expired. And that's when you're like, oh, it still hits hard. Even though, like that happens, sometimes you still have to call the floor. And then you call the floor, the nurse picks up, takes the critical result, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, the patient expired, but I'll still take the results. And we still got to go through those protocols to do things right. But it does stick in your psyche a little bit, because the samples that you get into the lab, the specimens you get into the lab, that's part of someone's actual physical being, and that test you're performing can really affect someone's life. Like if you're able to find it right away, or sometimes it's too late. That's the the part of the job that hurts sometimes.
I wonder if like having to deal with that stress and anguish, does that just make dealing with like the business that you run easier? Because it's like, hey, we can make this mistake, but like no one's gonna die from this. No one's gonna die.
Yeah, no one's gonna die. Like it's that funny saying. But did you die?
Yeah,
like you're right. It really does make me take things into perspective. Where the other the fun business, it feeds the soul, but if we make mistakes, it's not going to kill anyone.
Yeah. Unless maybe you're working in food.
Yeah, unless you're
not like, you're not doing the right way, but that's a whole other conversation. And actually, I've had a couple episodes about that. Check them out. The kimchi episode and the tea episode. But speaking of other episodes, because I didn't know this until I did my research, and finally getting into the business aspect. We're at that point, people. It's only an hour in, but it's all going to tie together. Yes. I promise. I didn't realize you were the other half of Bad Taste and everything associated with Bad Taste, because that has grown exponentially, even since I talked to Long, your buddy Long, back in episode 5. Go check that out, or pause this, check it out, and then come back to this, or listen to this and go back to it. I'm creating, my own little like Marvel Cinematic Universe. Speaking of nerdy stuff,
it's all in it.
Yeah, it's all in it. Yeah, yes. I've made that reference a number of times, where things are just told out of order, and it all makes sense when you watch the end. But I didn't realize that. I didn't realize you were the other half of that.
No one knows.
And well, they'll know now.
Now they do.
Yeah, now the secret's out. Sorry, Long, if that was supposed to be a secret. I
man.
apologize. I don't know if that was,
Yes.
but I guess I leaked it. So how I want to talk, just going from the beginning, because going along with having that conversation with Long, because he had, I think it was called Little Bastard Goat.
Little Bastard.
Were you involved in that?
No, I was not.
Okay.
I supported him in terms of, showing up to events and, buying the merchandise.
I remember seeing that in Woonsocket.
Yeah.
And he had that,
He did.
and then it went a certain way, and it was going well, and then things happened. I mean, you can think about the streetwear boom and things like that. Then he went and got a job. He had a work job, but then he started selling the vintage and stuff like that. So I think he was doing it out of his parents' garage. He moved back into the parents. So you saw this, you saw the rise and fall of that thing, right? Of Little Bastard. Then you see him working the job. You see him doing selling the vintage out of his parents' place. Did he approach you? Did you approach him? Did he have an idea and then he was approaching kind of everybody? How did you get involved and what were those first conversations like?
He approached me because we've always been close, Long and I. He approached me and he was like, "Hey, I got this idea, and we have a chance to basically pick up a really good collection from a amazing collector." And
what was the collection? Was that the comic book collection he was talking about, where you had to go Florida or something like that? It was comic books and action figures. Okay, because that was all right. I remember that.
So when that happened, he struck up the conversation with me. He's like, "Hey, I got this business venture. I don't know if you would like to be into it. Want to jump on board?" And he knew how much I love comic books, and I'm a huge nerd. I mean, you probably know by now I'm a huge nerd, and it was an opportunity for me to kind of go into another part of life where I just love being part of that world, that fandom. Well, for the most part, I love being part of that fandom.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier.
Yes.
But yeah.
So it was I was always believed in, you always got to feed the soul. That comes up a lot in my life. You got to feed the soul. You got to pay you got to do the 9 to 5 sometimes, pay the bills, but then you got to do things that really enrich your life, personally and mentally.
So he had this opportunity to go buy this person's collection of comic books, toys. I think there was a number of things.
Yes.
It wasn't shirt related in the beginning.
No, it wasn't.
Okay. And this was with his first store, which was in downtown Providence.
Yes. Because
they have just for anybody who doesn't know Providence geography, there's downtown Providence and there's different sections. The stores now is in Olneyville, which is a bit outside of downtown Providence, not far, but this was the first smaller store in downtown Providence. So a couple of questions when he comes to you with this idea, because hey, you're into nerd. Was he talking about having clothes as well, or did that come later? And the first thing was just get this collection, just to get the inventory.
That kind of came later on because he was involved with the clothing, and then it's funny we kind of blended and created this whole different thing because. He had the clothing part. I was really into the comics and nerdy stuff, and then we just kind of, melted those.
Because my first exposure to Bad Taste was just the clothing. I didn't even know the comic books and the stuff was a thing. I just from seeing on social media and things like that. When he had this opportunity to come up, I'm guessing you had to kick in some kind of capital.
Yeah.
Did you already have that capital lying around, or did you have to were there any reservations? I had this for a rainy day, and now it's this is taking a risk.
Well, I mean, a lot of it has to do with my parents. This is the thing with Asian parents, traditional Asian parents. They'll do anything for their children. And my parents were waiting for me to basically get married, buy a house, and they were kind of saving money for me to, for a down payment for, something big like that or big life event. And I told them, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get married anytime soon, but, I had this business venture that, potentially can, take off. What do you guys think? And my parents were like, how much do you need? And I will be forever grateful to them for something like that.
And so you get the money to get the inventory.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing, Long had a name for the business. Was there any reservations of did you ask any leading questions, or it's hey, you're my buddy, I've seen and also because he did have a previous business and it did well, but then it didn't, for the different reasons, again, go listen to the episode.
Yes.
It didn't work out in its first iteration. Were there any questions you had for him as far as asking about, hey, how do you plan on running this?
Yeah.
Did he have like the space yet even? Or was it just like, we need to get this inventory?
Yeah. So actually, it became, that conversation went long, and then a spot opened up in Oneyville. And that's when we decided to really, kind of hash things out. Like, all right, so we're going to open up the storefront. We're going to get this spot. And then we're going to start, we bring in the collection. We bring in the clothes.
So did you come in, was he already running the spot in downtown?
He was already running the spot in downtown.
Oh, okay. Yep. All right. So that's a little bit different because, so he was already running Bad Taste which was more clothing focused.
Correct.
Downtown. But then I guess he wanted to modify the business. Okay, this is a little bit different. So he already had this is why I think I was exposed to the clothing part first. So he's in downtown, he's doing Bad Taste at the clothing store. I remember there was some collectibles in there.
Yes.
But it was small. It wasn't big enough to
hold everything,
this blend and hold everything. But clothing is the thing he knows. So I'm guessing you're seeing that because he's doing pretty well. It's the clothing part too, almost, I guess, in a way, right? But then, so from what I'm understanding, he wanted to expand it.
Yes.
He has the opportunity to buy this big collection. So, okay, so you're already seeing that the business is running on a successful basis from the downtown.
Correct.
Because he's already got that out, and it looks like he's outgrowing it. And also, there was other things going on with that downtown building where like the rents and things were changing. Okay, so you had saw all of that, and then this opportunity comes up to get this collection. You get the capital to buy in. Were there any questions you had for him or any concerns that he had to address? Like just because what were some parts of that conversation?
Yeah,
if whatever you're willing to reveal.
Yeah,
just because I think this is like the parts that people don't see.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, me and my buddy just went into this business.
We just did this.
Like, that's the story that they put on the website, but then like you don't know like, well, were there issues? Like, were there like, what kind of questions were being asked? And you being a very detail-oriented guy, I'm guessing there was like probably a good amount of questions you had where it's like, I need certain information before I go in on this.
So basically what the conversation came down to after, we got the space, like, all right, so how are we going to figure out rent? How are we going to figure out, how everyone gets paid? Are we going to hire people? What are going to be the hours? And, even that was in flux because of, the pandemic, because things had to change. We had to adapt, again, it learning Jeet Kune Do allowed me to kind of, go with however the government decided, who stayed open and who closed, stuff like that. But, those conversations that I had with Long in the beginning, like I said, like who's going to be in charge of the bills? What are, in terms of finances, like who's it going to come down to keep the lights on, like to make sure that, things are getting paid on time and, stuff like that.
And so were there any concerns about, because like I've heard this before where it's like, don't go into business with friends and or family. Were there any concerns in that aspect before you went into business together? Like, it's my friend, but like, if this doesn't go well, this could strain the friendship.
Yeah, it could. I mean, I did think about that, but the thing is, like, Long and I, we work really well together. He's the artistic mind, where I am more of the details, the framework guy, the behind the scenes,
the processes.
The processes, yes. So, he has his superpower, I have my superpower. So we work well with each other.
Has there been any times where like, maybe not even things not going well, but like there's been, because like you're friends, but then also like now you're business partners where like those things kind of bleed into each other. Has there been any issues with that?
No.
Okay.
Surprisingly, right? Because, like sometimes, things in the business can be really stressful. But when things become stressful, I try to always step back a bit. I try not to react when I'm emotionally high. So, I'll step back. I'll really, think of things logically before, a big decision has to be made.
Now, that, you were saying like, hey, my superpower is being like the business and processes guy, right? And then he's the creative mind and things of that, right? Was that the plan from the get-go? Was that like, and was it like a 50-50 split of the business?
Yeah.
And again, I'm just trying to illustrate the more of the processes and the stuff behind. Because again, it's the point of the show. It's the creative and the business side. So now you guys understand. Now you guys, gals, they, them, everybody out there understand why I have you as a guest now.
That's right.
Because I think this is a really good embodiment of that. Was that the plan from the get-go?
It kind of was, yeah. Because we knew like Long, he was going to be the face of basically our page, our social media page, because social media is such a big thing with businesses now.
Well, no, was that because he already had the social media of Bad Taste and he already had the name? Like, did that just make sense to like leave him to be the face?
Yes, correct.
Did he want you to come in and like be more of a face though?
I don't know if he did. Okay. I never asked. I'm
just curious. I wonder if that was like
I never wanted that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I never wanted that because I already do so many things, and The thing is, like, as much as I like social media for the business stuff, when it comes to like my personal life, I don't really put much stuff out there about my personal life, and except for my hobbies. That's just I just love to share my fun stuff.
So the agreement is you're not the face. He's gonna be the face. He's gonna be the creative. You're doing more of the processes stuff. And it is like a 50-50 split of the business. You did put up capital, but he was running. So how did you figure out it was going to be a 50-50 split, considering that he was running Bad Taste before you had come along? Is because you bought the inventory that he could expand the business and you were paying half the rent in the beginning?
Yep. Okay. And he already knew like kind of like the business end of things, because this is my first business venture basically. So, I'm learning from him. He's learning from me from different things, and we just kind of fed off of each other.
Now, is that besides, being good friends, is that the reason why do you think he came to you, is because like, oh, I need I know the business, but maybe I don't want to deal with it as much. I need to process these guys. I need to like fine tune things. Is that why he came to you? Like, has it ever been expressed?
I think so. And also, probably my geeky nerd knowledge of comic books.
There you go.
So we always went to, comic book conventions together. And, it finally came to a point where it was like, you know what, like we have these passions. Why don't we just, do something about it and make some money? And
so what do you think you brought to the table? And did you realize like what you were bringing to the table from the get-go, or was it like after X amount of months? What did you think you brought to the table in terms of, because like he's already running it, you know what I mean? So it's just like, you could maybe just been an investor and been a silent partner and been like, hey, I enjoy this shit, but like you go do your thing. I'm just gonna invest some money and then give me a dividend and I own part of this business, which is fine for some people, but like it seems like you wanted to be involved.
Yeah.
So what did you want to do, and what do you think you brought to the table? And then were there things that you ended up doing that you didn't think you were going to end up doing? And then like that was a surprise.
Yeah. So what I brought to the table, I guess, like, again, my knowledge of pop culture stuff, 80s movies, 90s stuff, just comic book nerdy things in general, even video games. I kind of brought that over. You can see now on our page, we do a lot more like movie reviews and, different things like, like San Diego Comic-Con, we'll post stuff up about that. Whereas, before, when Long was running just Bad Taste with just himself, a lot of it is just, the vintage clothing stuff. So now, we're bringing in more, a more fun, geeky kind of Comic-Con kind of mentality to it.
I want to get to that in a moment. And like, do you enjoy doing the process stuff? And what are some processes behind the scenes that you do or that you're in control of that maybe people don't realize when running a clothing store / like collectibles / trade show, which we're going to get into that in a bit, that people just don't see?
They don't see, for example, insurance, they don't see, different things. Like if you do like a big event, you got to get in contact with, the city to see what ordinance they have, different regulations that you possibly not aware of, a lot of phone calls to, like executive types that, you usually don't have conversations with, thinking, if running a business.
And I'm guessing also too, just dealing with like the budgeting and then like how you source inventory. And then it's like, hey, we have to go to this like collectibles trade show because we need inventory because like we sold X amount of comics, and like keeping track of like what sells in the collectibles or like having to do you do all that as well? Like looking at like what's hot in collectibles, like, hey, we need like Star Wars is going to come out with a new movie. We need to go buy a bunch of Star Wars collectibles right now because that new movie comes out. We need to be here to sell this.
Yes, correct. Actually, I look into that stuff. Like, for example, I'll bring this up, something that happened a couple years ago. Right before the pandemic hit, I got a hold of Secret Wars 1 through 12, all graded. And if anyone's been paying attention to the San Diego Comic-Con this weekend, Marvel Studios just announced Secret Wars for one of the next big Avenger movies. And I have every single issue graded already, ready to go. I don't know if I'm going to keep that for myself or eventually, throw it on the market. But it's just a nice piece to have.
I was going to ask, can you go through the process of like, because I think there's now like talking the trading cards and now comics and everything, collectibles getting graded, what that process is like? Because I think it's like another process that people don't think about.
They don't.
That you have to like. It's like, oh, people just grab. And I have a question about inventory too with your end of the business because I think it's interesting. But like, what is the grading process? Like, how does that even happen? What do you have to do? And like, there's like a wait period, and there's money you got to pay, and all that good stuff.
So when you grade, like, say for example, a comic book, you can go to a trade show like a Comic-Con or something, and they'll have different companies there. Like for example, CGC, they'll have a representative there.
Can you explain what those 3 letters mean? What that company is?
You know what? I have to look that up.
Oh,
Let's see. CGC. I know we always use acronyms.
Comics Grading
Grading
Company Corporation, maybe?
CGC. Yeah, it's Comic Books Grading Collectors. That's what the CGC stands for.
Is that like the main one? Because I know
That's
it's like
one of the main ones.
cards, there's like Beckett, but then there's like another one. It depends on which one you choose and stuff like that.
That's probably like the main one that everyone's recognizes.
So now if you're not at a con, like what do? You do you like send it to them?
You can send it to them. Yep. So what they do is you send it to them. They'll grade it. I don't know how long it takes now. With how the pandemic is. And then they'll grade it and then they'll send it back with a certificate for you, and that's how you get your your score on there.
And then it's like that just gets you that score.
Yes.
And you're like paying money for that, and you're waiting, and there's time.
Yes.
And that thing could go up and down in value depending on the score or just like the popularity and things like that. Which leads me to a question about inventory, because unlike the bad taste, the I'm doing quotes here, but like because like there's bad taste, the clothing brand, and like Long's dealing with vintage clothes, but also like making clothes as well, right? Because you guys have like certain T-shirts, certain hoodies, stuff like that. That's part of the store, but as the store expanded now into like comic books and collectibles. But the thing is, with that part of it, you're not making new comic books and collectibles.
No, we're not.
You have to go find them.
Yes, we do.
And so like, how does that affect the business in that like you're not creating? It's like one thing when like you're taking raw materials and creating your own inventory. And there's certain things you have to do with that where like the inventory already exists, but you have to go source it.
You got to go find it. Yeah.
So like, what is that process like? And what are like the issues with that? Cause I think some people are like, oh, like flipping culture is easy. I'm just going to go to a yard sale and then look it up on eBay and then flip it. But like, there's more. And like, if on paper, it is that easy. But the other thing is like, well, like, are you tracking the popularity? What's the condition? Like, what did it sell for? What's the average market rate? Like, so, and like, I have to go find and source it. So like, there's could be like there's gas. I have to travel to these places to go get it. Like, am I buying a ton of stuff to get the one thing, but the rest of the things it's going to sit there in like a warehouse before I sell it? Like, how long am I going to sit on it? Things of that nature.
So when it comes down to stuff like that, we, obviously if we do start selling more of a, like say like a comic, or, a bunch of comic books, we do go out to, different, like flea markets. Flea markets are a great source of, vintage comic books, because, those are the comics that, we like to bring in, because, our whole thing is like, vintage collectibles, vintage clothing. So we want to kind of keep things in like the, the 60s, 70s, 80s, time era for comic books. And, sometimes when we do buy those books, we do get those books and we display them, but a lot of times people don't buy them, which is fine. It's just almost like an art piece that you kind of display. And then, people will come check out those pieces, and then they'll, pick up a hoodie or a t-shirt or whatever, other merchandise that there is at the store.
And is there ever like, or have there ever been times where you picked up something, right? And maybe because like how much does timing go into it? Because I wonder, like, have you ever picked up stuff where it was past its popularity and it's like, oh, that bubble of that popularity burst? Or coincidentally, have you ever picked up something like, oh, this is not popular, we'll clearance it out, and then all of a sudden, a month later, Netflix is like, they're gonna make the live action version of this anime, and like, God damn it, we had the books and now we just sold them.
Yeah. I mean, there has been some circumstances like that, because for example, before Infinity War came out, we had multiple copies of the Infinity War on our just like in our boxes. Like some of them weren't worth that much money. They weren't in like excellent condition, so we just kind of like tagged it as whatever the sale was at the time. And then we go, and when the movies came out, we're like, oh man, the value for those comic books kind of went up. If we would have held on to a couple of them and got them graded, we could have made a good profit off of it.
Because like that's going to be an interesting challenge, because unlike certain like things when you're dealing with materials or food, like you can always like there's going to be market fluctuations, but only to a certain degree, because you know how much like this like this thing is going to cost, and like how much I have to set the price at in order to like make my money back and make a profit. Whereas you're buying it at a lower than what you're going to charge, because you need to make money on it. But at the same time, the value of that thing can fluctuate wildly depending on so many external factors outside of your control. So it's like, again, like how do you even evaluate that? Do you just go like, well, we bought this comic for this thing, and now like what? I'm going to sell it for double or like triple, or like do you adjust it based on like, hey, it was $5 but quote Fat Joe, yesterday's price, not today's price.
Yeah.
Like, because Marvel just announced this thing, so now this one comic, because now he's getting his own show, he or she or they are getting their own show, we're going to now triple it in price because it's popular, which sounds kind of messed up, but like, I get it.
I mean, that's how the market is.
Yeah,
right?
so it's like how much time do you spend focusing on that stuff and just like keeping track of that?
Honestly, like, we try not to fuss too much about it because we know we're going to make it. If we do sell something, I don't want to say at a loss, but like if we do sell something lower than what we would want to sell it at, we're still getting, a customer or a client, there. And, it's really, you almost like creating that relationship with the customer, right? So like, yes, we can sell something for a really high price and then make so much money off of them. And then they're never going to come back because we just, basically rip them off. Or we can sell it at, not at a loss, but, lower than what we ideally would have wanted to sell it at. And then, that person will also remember, oh, wow, these guys cut me a deal. I'm going to keep coming back. They're freaking awesome. They're down to earth guys. Like, that's the kind of mentality that we have for, our business model.
Now, speaking of that, because I think this is a good aside, like, there's all this talk when it comes to, and no, we're not going to get into this, people, that I'm just using as a way to introduce the question, NFTs and metaverse, especially with nerdy stuff. And the idea of building a community, it's like, well, we got a Discord, that's a community. I'm like, that's not really a community. That's like a way for a community to talk to each other, but like you just having a place where people can talk, like,
it's like
doesn't
like
mean
a board
community.
where people can just throw things up.
So with Bad Taste, like, long built up a community around like the clothing part of it.
Yeah.
And then you come in with collectibles. And how long did it take to build up like the expanded, I guess, Bad Taste of like what it is now? Like, how long, like, cause like you got the rent in that building, but like it probably had some customers, but there was foot traffic downtown, and like over there, it's, it's got its own audience because you guys are next to Troop. You're in Oneyville, so it's like outside of downtown, it gets foot traffic, but it's, it's not the same type of foot traffic you get in like a downtown area. Better parking though. How long did it take to build up, in your opinion, like to build up community and just to let people know, like, hey, we're beyond the clothes now. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, how long did that take?
It actually happened pretty quickly. Probably within like the next couple months. Once we got the spot, and then we started just throwing things out on social media, showing the different vintage comic books that we had, and then we started to get some traction.
What do you think it attributes to that? Because like some people, like, they post all the time, there's no growth.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you think it's because of the way you were posting? Do you think it's because of what you were dealing in? Like, what do you think attributes to that fast growth?
I think it's just the way that that basically the brainchild of this is Lung. He's wonderful with social media. He knows how to grab people's attention. I think it's just honestly his skill set in social media, being engaged with people who would just get in contact with us, just nerding out with them, and again, that gets traction. That's energy. That's momentum. And once you start engaging with people, it naturally becomes a little community.
Now, speaking of, and I want to go back to a couple of things you said there, as a way to tie all this together. But one thing that I've noticed is, the scaling of that. And when I say scale, because it's one thing to run your own business, it's another thing to run a trade show with other multiple businesses coming in. And there was two. The first one was more your wheelhouse.
Yes, it is.
A comics and collectibles trade show. Can you just walk through, like, first, what was the name of the trade show? And then walk through the process of, hey, we got this idea for a trade show. And then it's like, cool, let's do a trade show. But then you being a processes guy, it's, oh crap, we got to do this trade show. Can you just walk through all of that? Because I think like people are just like, oh, like you just rent out a building and do a trade show, right? And it's like, no,
there's a lot of framework, building, and also a lot of phone calls that you got to make, a lot of different connections you have to make.
Because what was it, the Foolish Bandits trade show, was it called? Or was that a different thing?
The Foolish Bandits was when we first launched our story. It was always like if you want to think of it as a spin-off of Bad Taste, right? So we, like, Long and I, we consider ourselves the Foolish Bandits. It's kind of like this funny thing that like, I guess, a persona that we have. But the first trade show that we put together was called the Near Mint Expo. And that, again, like you said, that's more of my spectrum of like the whole business side of things. Like, I'm more into the collectibles, the comic books, the geeky stuff. And, when we decided to make a trade show like that, we obviously needed a facility. We needed a headliner, and we were very fortunate and lucky because
so not to interrupt, you needed a place to have it.
Yes,
and then you needed something to get the attention, draw people in. But also, how when you first had the idea, how far out did you how did you I guess before you could dive into the process, how did you to start the process conversation off? Because I think it's interesting. How much time did you give yourself? How did you come up with the deadline of this is when this is going to happen?
I think it took us we started 6 months before the actual trade show happened. We started thinking, because our trade show was in July, I believe, of that year. And we started thinking about it in the wintertime.
Okay.
We were like, you know what, let's throw this banger of a show. We were just kind of getting out of the pandemic, the worst of the pandemic, if you want to think of it that way. And, we just wanted a little fun show that just kind of got everyone together and get everyone out of their homes and just nerd out together.
And why I guess was the target, did you both come up with the target date of 6 months? Did that give you enough time, or was it just let's just try and do it?
It was just let's just try and do it.
Because I'm guessing when you get the facility, you got to tell them when you want to do it. So how did you think 6 months, or was there some research as to 6 months is either more than enough time or not enough time?
We just kind of decided with 6 months because that we were like, all right, that should give us enough time to just kind of lay the groundwork for everything.
Okay, so you have this idea for a trade show, and you're like, we have 6 months to do this.
Yes.
So it's okay, clock's ticking.
Yep.
And you guys still run your business and do the other stuff.
We're still doing a business as well.
And then you work in a virology lab and martial arts instructing, and brief aside, why not be a martial arts instructor?
Because I know how much work it takes to run a martial arts business, and I don't know if I have the energy for that, because I really love martial arts, and it's like my escape from everything else. It's very meditative.
You don't want to turn the escape and the thing into a thing that adds stress.
Correct.
Kind of.
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So anyway, 6 months. You have time to do this.
Yes.
All right. So now it's let's talk about the headliner part first before the venue.
All right.
What was the plan of the headliner? Were you just thinking of people because it's just oh, we're gonna get a headliner. It's how do you determine who's a headliner?
This was we were so blessed that this happened. When we came up with the idea for the show, we just wanted someone maybe a low tiered. I don't want to say low tiered because I don't want to disrespect anyone in the comic book industry, but someone that can draw someone in where there be fans of either this artist or a writer. There would be fans, but it wouldn't cost us too much money to throw the show. So we got in touch with one of our contacts, John Simino. He's actually one of our mentors, and he's helped us tremendously when it comes to the comic book industry and making different connections. And we got in touch with him. It was like, hey, we're thinking of a trade show. Who can we get? And John was like, do you want Roy? I'm like, Roy? As in Roy Thomas? He's like, yes. I'm like,
can you explain who Roy Thomas is for those that don't know?
All right. So Roy Thomas is actually one of the most influential comic book writers in history. If you want to think of, let's say, Stan Lee as the top tier guy in terms of Marvel and how Marvel became so popular in the world. So Stan Lee was the top, and number 2 was Roy Thomas, basically his protege, if you want to think of it that way.
Gotcha. I was gonna make a weird tangent, but I'm not gonna do it. Because nobody would get the reference. I'll tell it to you after. But,
all right.
But so he's that high up guy, and you had a connection to get him.
Yes.
Now does he do trade shows normally, or does that?
He does, okay. But for much bigger trade shows,
So because you had the connect, it was just hey, do this as a favor to some buddies of mine, basically.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And Roy actually asked John who are these guys, and John was like, they're good friends of mine, and they're these young kids who are just trying to make a name for themselves in the industry. And Roy was like, you know what, if you like these guys, let's do it.
So you got your headliner.
Yes.
Now you need to get a venue.
Yeah.
So the venue is in the Waterfire Arts Center, which, funny enough, is in Oneyville and not downtown where Waterfire actually happens.
I know. Very confusing.
If anybody's like wondering what the heck Waterfire is, it's exactly what it sounds like. We light a river on fire. Not the actual river. It's not like it's polluted with gasoline, but there's a river that runs through downtown Providence. There's little wooden areas that are above the river. We put wood in these like baskets. We light it on fire. A bunch of tourists come and see it.
It's a fun night.
See it once. It's a fun night. After that, it's just like great tourists are
touristy stuff.
Are clogging up everything if you live in the city. But if you're a tourist, please come
check it out.
Check it out. That way, you could spend money on local businesses who are always appreciative of other people's money.
Absolutely.
So, brief thing about Waterfire. It's like, why are they saying Waterfire? There you go. But the Waterfire Arts Center is an art center building. It is a big open building. They do have art projects and things there. Got a nice rooftop area. So a nice venue that's big enough to have an expo. What made you choose? It got a big enough parking lot. Yeah. It's easy to drive to, even though it's near downtown, but not in downtown. What were the factors in choosing that as the venue rather than other halls, or even like outside of Providence, like going to other towns where it can potentially be cheaper, or like the convention center, which is where they usually have Rhode Island Comic Con.
Yeah.
Why Waterfire Arts Center?
Well, I mean, if you walk into the Waterfire Arts Center, it just looks so different from all the different vending places that we've been to. When we walked in there, I was like, wow, I think aesthetically, it just looks so cool.
Yeah, because other cons are like, it's kind of like, I've seen videos of other cons where it's just like either hotel conference rooms,
and it's just
like it all like generically looks the same.
Yeah.
Whereas the Waterfire Arts Center is like this big, huge, like kind of factory style building and brick and large windows. It just has a different vibe to it.
It does. It has a different vibe. And just when you walk into there, we saw the potential. It was like, oh, this can be a really cool event.
This is the spot.
This is the spot.
So now, all right. So now you talk to whoever's in charge of Waterfire Arts Center. How does that process go? Of like, we want to do a show here, and then they're like, who the hell are you?
Who the hell are you? Well, we were very lucky because Long had a connection with the Waterfire Art Center. So all it was just a phone call and picking a date.
Networking and having good friends.
Yeah, exactly. Just being a decent person and doing, trying to do the right thing. And that goes a long way.
So how did did they ask you questions to calculate the cost of like, because like I've seen art exhibitions there, but like, here, we're going to hang some pieces of art and let people come in whenever versus like, oh, we're doing a trade show. We're going to have like a ton of tables and there's like people, it's going to be some food vendors, some drink vendors. And if the drinks are alcoholic, that's probably a different thing they got to worry about, liabilities and stuff like that. So what questions did they ask you? And like, what was the price if you're comfortable talking about it? And was that a sticker shock or it's like, oh crap, we got to raise capital for this?
Yeah. So when we did get in touch with the Waterfire Arts Center, they did ask us questions like, all right, how many people you were expecting? What are how many food vendors are going to be there? If there are going to be food vendors, are you going to have alcoholic drinks? You're going to have DJs.
And how many general vendors?
Yes, you're going to have security.
Are you going to? It's going to be all ages, or it's like
stuff like that. That's stuff that you don't think about until you're like, oh crap, how do we want to run the show? And then pricing, like how do you want to price tickets? Stuff like VIP lines, different things like that, different tiers of admission.
And so, like, did they asked you all that and then they calculate the price based on that?
No, they kind of already had a price for us.
Okay, so there was a price in mind. Did you have to pay that off right away and then do the show? Or okay.
Yes, we did. Mm-hmm.
So you had to pay that up front.
Yeah.
So now it's, you pay that up front, you have the loss of like, what was the amount, if you don't mind me asking? Just to do the math here.
To be honest, I can't remember the exact figures, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's just throw a general number out there, whether it's correct or not, but like
say it was like 10 grand.
10 grand.
Yeah.
Actually, you read my mind. I was going to say it's $10,000. It's like, okay, you guys had to put up $10,000 to get the space. Got your headliner, but now it's like you have to work backwards and figure like, so I was like, now how did you figure out like how much to, because you got to make the $10,000.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing, correct me if I'm wrong, there's maybe 3 sources of revenue for you guys. Maybe not even 3, but like if you sell food and drinks, that's one source of revenue. If you you're selling the spaces, the booth spaces for other people, other businesses,
the tables.
To have a table there, that's revenue 2, and then the ticket price is revenue 3. How did you go about now? Was that the three main sources of revenue for that show?
You hit it right in the head right there.
How did you determine, did you determine the table price first and then be like, let's just hit the 10 grand through that and then all the ticket sales is gravy? Like, how did you determine table price versus ticket price versus the cut you get from the food and drink sales?
Yeah.
Because you're not making the food and drink yourselves. You're hiring other people.
Hiring others.
To basically have a table there. So, you're just like charging them rent. And it's like a one-time thing, like kind of like, here's your table space, or are you getting a collection of every food and drink sale?
So with the tables, it was just like you said, it was just like rent. So you pay, the vendors would pay one price. They would get, whatever size table it was. And then, that's a majority of our overhead was from, making it back from the actual tables. And also, we had our own table to sell merchandise as well, and so I forgot to mention that. So we had some
also revenue source number 4.
Yeah, number 4. Yep. So we had our own table selling our near mint stuff or our bad taste stuff.
And then, so what were the factors that went into like just determining how much booth space should cost? Was it just like, how did you even figure out like how big the booth space should be? It's like. Hey, we're going to give them realistically this much space. We can fit X amount of this much space based on the square footage. Like, how'd you go about that?
So what we did was before we did that, we went to other comic book conventions. So we saw roughly about the size of each vendor's table or space. And, we kind of, we got an idea of how much, that expo was charging. And, we're a new event. So we didn't want to charge say a big event, like for example, like if
Rhode
Comic Con, they sold a table for like I'm just throwing a number out there, like $500. We're not going to charge $500. We're going to charge $200. That's how we determined the pricing for the tables and all that, because we're just starting up. We want to get people in. We still want to make want to break even at least. So that's how we determined the price of
okay. So then you're like, we have to sell this many $200 booth spaces in order to like break even.
To break even.
So were you more focused on selling the booth spaces to break even first, and then the ticket sales were just like gravy after that?
Yes, exactly. Okay. So that's how we ended up strategizing.
So the booth sales were like, we gotta sell this many 200 tables. Yes. Okay, because then it's like ticket prices after that is just like pure profit.
Pure profit.
And then with the food and drink, were you getting a cut of every sale of the food and drink vendor, or were you just charging them like a table space one time?
No, we were just charging them that one time. And then actually for the drinks, I believe Drinks Troop ran that. So they got like all the sales for that. And we didn't have to worry about liquor licenses and all that. So that's
because
one of the
they came with the liquor license. So you just charged them like, here's how much this space is going to cost you for the day, anything you make on that. Yeah. So like, yeah, it's a potential source of revenue, but like, do you want to deal with the headaches of liquor licenses and all that? And like, that's because you're already paying building insurance and stuff like that in case something bad happens. Okay.
Which we had to scramble for that. That's another thing I wanted to mention.
Oh, can you go into that?
Yeah,
actually? Okay. Because I don't think people like I buy insurance for what? I'm like, well, in case anything happens.
Yeah, so there's a special insurance that you have to get for big events like that. We had no idea because we thought, we already have.
I wouldn't think of that either.
Yeah. It's like, we already have insurance. Well, we have insurance for our business, but we don't have supplemental insurance.
For the event?
Yes, for the event.
How did you find that out?
We found it out because probably I think it was like 4 days before the event.
Oh, geez. It was like a month before.
Yeah,
holy shit.
This happened like really fast. And they're like, oh, by the way, do you have a supplemental insurance for the expo? And we're like,
I'm surprised. No, when you say they asked you that, who do you mean?
The Waterfire. Yeah,
I'm surprised they didn't ask you that in the beginning.
I think they kind of thought that we knew, because probably most. Most people probably already knew about this. We didn't know because this is our first event. And
see what happens when you assume people?
Exactly, I know. But we were so lucky. We got in touch with this company, I think down in Pennsylvania, and they were able to get it done for us like on the weekend. It was crazy.
Wait, you got in touch with the company in Pennsylvania? What was the company and what did they do? Because this is insurance for an event in Rhode Island. Yeah. So I'm just curious how.
So we got their contact because I guess Waterfire. This is not the first time this has happened. So they
so Waterfire's like, we got a guy, or we got a gal, or we got a person, we got a company. It's like, okay, gotcha.
We're like, oh my goodness. So we're so lucky. Like when it came down to that.
I'm guessing you had to pay extra though for them to like expedite it.
Yeah, it was a little bit of extra, but I mean nothing, astronomical.
No, what did the event insurance cover, and like what would happen if you just did the event and not have that?
We would probably get shut down if someone came and was like, hey,
I'm guessing the state or the city.
Yes, exactly.
Now, what is that insurance? What is that insurance called, and what does it cover? Because I think anybody's going to try and throw an event like there's something you probably.
I believe they just called it a supplemental insurance, event insurance, or something to that effect. I can bring up the email later on to get the exact thing. But basically, it covered any one that came in, safety, fire, and yeah, that's really what it came down to.
Okay, so now you hit your how did you get the word out to these vendors? Like you're going to other cons for research.
Yes.
Was it just going to other cons and advertising your con at like another person's con? Did the people from those cons get pissed at you? Like how, like, this is our shit. Like, why are you talking to our guys?
So
like,
when we obviously we would hand out flyers when we go to different cons. But the thing is, like, obviously we had to be respectful and talk to whoever is running whatever con that is that we did.
Oh, so you didn't just show up and be like, hey, come to our shit.
Yeah, like, hey, come to our shit. Like poaching them. No, it's you have to kind of, again, we got to do it the respectful way. You got to tell them, hey, we're thinking about throwing a little thing. Is it okay if we laid out some flyers? And then a lot of times they're like, yeah, that's cool, man.
And so, all right, so now seems like you hit your table mark.
Yeah.
Okay. You got your insurance, got your headliner, you got your food and drink vendor and something like Troop, so they can deal with all that other stuff.
Yes.
And now how did you determine, so a couple questions. First, how did you determine the ticket price? Because now it's all profit, so do you make it low? Like, how did you determine, like, this is how much each person should enter?
We just wanted people to get in, so we just charge people like $10, $15.
Gotcha.
Like most cons would charge $30 to $50 depending on admission.
Yeah.
And we just wanted to get people in. We just wanted people to have a good time. Again, get everyone out of their homes because of the pandemic. And we just wanted to have a ball, basically.
And because you'd already broken even with, or even potentially made some profit off the table. Did you make profit off the table sales, or did you break even?
We broke even, yeah.
Okay.
We broke even.
So anything after that now, like everything's paid for, you're at zero essentially. So with the tickets now, anything you do is pure profit.
It's gravy.
How much did you do in ticket sales?
In terms of ticket sales, I think we made a few thousand.
There you go. So now it's like, okay, a few $1,000. And so you actually made profit. You didn't lose any money.
We didn't.
And now it's like, it also gets your brand name of like all the other brands of the booth, but because you're running it, gets Bad Taste out there.
Exactly.
Now Bad Taste has this, not that it didn't have them before, but now it's got this like cultural cachet in the world of collectibles and clothing, because you did this massive show.
Yeah. That's
like, because there's not many in Rhode Island besides Rhode Island Comic-Con. So, or like maybe these small like collectible trade shows, but like you did one. And also like, I'll as somebody who attended it.
Did you have a good time?
I had a good time, but you also like made it cool. It wasn't just like the stereotype, and I see this as a nerd, but it wasn't like the stereotypical vibe that you would get from these collectible trade shows where it's in the basement of a thing or it's in like a church. Like it had a different vibe to it. I think the building led to it, but I think just your own personal way of promoting things with the Bad Taste brand, it gave it a different vibe where I feel like even people who weren't into comics or collectibles, and code probably has something to do with it, people want to get out of the house. But like having Troop there because they bring their own flavor of things. Hopefully future episode, Troop, if you're listening, I want to talk to your owners. That'd be a good episode. But it seemed like it was cooler than the normal concept.
Yeah,
to me, like that's the vibe. That's the vibe I got from it. So it gave you that like almost like that cultural cachet. Like now you're in a certain place where it's like there's an authority now, and also because you got this headliner to do autographs and stuff like that. What was the? So I have one question. What was the experience like of once that trade show was done, like, or not even done, like as you were doing it, were you like, oh crap, this is real, like people are showing up. Like, holy shit.
When we saw the line outside, like we had a moment where we just looked at each other. It was like, oh my God, holy crap, this is actually happening. We put this shit together. Like, this is amazing.
Now, what logistical stuff were you doing? Because I have a buddy of mine who worked in like fashion trade shows. Were you like a general manager of the trade show? Were you like directing like, hey, like because I guess you had to hire people or friends or whatever to like be at the door and taking tickets and security and like this vendor's booth has a problem, or like this vendor says they're supposed to be here, but then somebody already took their booth space. I'm just trying to think of all the problems that would come up. So like, were you general managing all of that and putting out those fires all day?
Exactly. So my job was to, help people get in and, making sure the vendors were comfortable, whatever they needed. If there was a spill anywhere, I took care of that. They needed a drink. I just kept doing laps around like, hey, do you need anything? How you doing? Like, is everyone okay?
It's like a concierge for everybody else.
Yeah, basically. And we've got to make sure that our headliner's doing right, because that's if he doesn't have a good time, he has a bad experience,
He's
and
got to tell other people.
That gets out everywhere. So we basically, like you said, putting out little fires, and then also leaving. If we don't have a smooth breakdown of the show, all the vendors are going to remember that, and they're going to be like, "Wow, we went to the show. It took us so long to get out. Like, we were basically stuck there." And then those are the things that you had to be able to handle.
It's why I don't go to Raleigh Comic-Con. I went to the first one, and then everyone after I didn't go because all my friends would tell me how much of just basically a shit show it is from not due to like the vendors or the people they get, but just like getting in and getting out, or they would like book another show in the same convention center and they wouldn't run it correctly. That's why I don't go, because like apparently every year it just gets worse and worse from a logistics standpoint.
Yeah, because to go in and out of that show, if I remember correctly, there was only one spot to kind of like bring, like all the vendors would bring their tables in through one way.
Yeah, I was hearing vendor stuff and participant stuff. Like it was just a mess, and it seems like it gets worse every year.
It's because it gets
like,
bigger
I don't go.
And bigger, yeah.
So it's I think it's interesting and good that like you're talking about the stuff of like, no, we had to get like how to get people in, how to take care of them, then how to get them out. So like the whole experience is good.
Yes.
And things of that nature. So that in relation to bad taste in and of itself, because like you put money up for Bad Taste, and Bad Taste was getting attention, becoming successful, like was there a point where you're like, oh, I'm part of this business now, and this is like I'm actually running a business? Like, was it when you first like saw like the new storefront? Was it when like it was getting attention and like maybe turning a profit? Or was it when you did this trade show? Was it certain milestones, or was there like one milestone where you're just like, I am now a business owner?
I think it was certain milestones, because when we got the space, I was like, oh wow, we're starting something right now. And then as we're building up to throw the different events that we did, I was like, oh wow, like people are actually showing up to this. And then I think
you're doing like smaller like block party type events,
little
events, because you guys were next door to Troop,
exactly.
Hence you had the relationship with them to have them do your show when you moved it. But like it's a good way to do it. But like you're throwing these smaller events to get people in, to get people interested, etc.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, it wasn't really until that big show where I was like, wow, I am a business owner. Like, because this was all fun to me. Like, this was just like a side hustle that I was passionate about. But like, once we saw all the people, all the vendors filled up that expo that we threw, like Long and I stood on top of the balcony surveying everything, and we were just like, damn, we did this.
Go hard or go home. If you follow your passion, you'll never work a day in your life. You are the face of your business. Any of this sound familiar? Let me be clear. I'm not disparaging anyone who follows their passion, goes all in on that passion, and creates a successful, thriving business. Many of the guests on this very show have done just that. But Thoney brings up a good point. What if you don't want to go all in? What if your passion is your escape from stress? And what if you don't want to turn that escape from stress into a possible source of stress? What if you don't like being the face of a business, but rather your talents and sense of fulfillment comes from what goes on behind the scenes? What if you want to keep your side hustle just that, a side hustle? Thoney's story illustrates that there are benefits to being the person behind the scenes. You get the benefits of having a successful business and fewer drawbacks, since you're not the face of that business. So when you're thinking about your next project, your next venture, your next business, consider the benefits of being the person behind the scenes. Feeds my soul. This is a side hustle. Like, there's a reason why you don't teach martial arts, because you find enjoyment in that, to the point where if you try to make that a business, it takes away the enjoyment. Yeah. So here's a question: why this opportunity came up? You are interested in virology, but it wasn't like your parents kind of pushed you into it. Luckily, you were interested in it, right? Mm-hmm. Why not go full bore, especially if it's making money?
Yeah.
Why not go full bore into
into this.
into this business, like I'm guessing it's generating some kind of income.
Yeah.
You're not losing money on it, right?
Correct.
Why not go full bore into it? Because you hear about this nowadays. It's like, no, like especially with the Great Resignation. And I don't think either way is right or wrong. But why for you did you not go full dive right in?
Because I guess there's that, you know, that scientific brain of me and also the artistic brain of me. And I had to feed both, if you want to think of it that way. The, you know, scientific brain, obviously the lab feeds that. And the, you know, the art part of the brain, the side hustle, the business, the martial arts. You know, the martial arts doesn't, you know, give me any revenue, but, you know, the business end of things for our bad taste stuff, that gives me revenue, you know.
Do you think, well, actually, I should say, has it gotten to a point, or do you think it'll ever get to a point where there may be like an inflection, meaning bad taste grows because you want it to grow,
it does,
right? Like any business.
I mean, I do want it to grow, obviously.
You know, and you've already done this major trade show. You've done another trade show, which was more fashion oriented.
Yes.
I'm not going to get into that only because of time, but also because that's more of Long's wheelhouse, not your own. This is your episode. But has it ever gotten to a point, or does it concern you that may get to a point where like that business is going to demand more of your time to the point where like you may not be able to do the work in the lab as good as you did before?
Absolutely. Because, you know, not only do I, you know, work in the lab, I actually manage the lab. So
yeah, and that's the other thing too.
Yeah.
Like, and you have to manage those people, make sure that runs smoothly. So like, has it clashed where like one's taking up too much time from the other, or
there have been spurts where, you know, one is taking more time, but, you know, I try to keep that in check. I try to keep things balanced. I try to, you know, what I say, switch hats. Like if I leave the lab, I try to leave all the bullshit from the lab in the lab. I don't carry that over. I try not to at least carry it over to my, you know, my other stuff. But, you know, sometimes it's hard. We're all humans. So if, you know, if I ever decide that the quality of, or if I'm not able to give enough energy to my business, my personal business, because of work as a manager in the lab, I would probably step back as a manager because, you know, no one is ever, I mean, I'm going to be replaceable at this company. No one is going to be able to replace me, say, if, you know, things don't work out, you know, in the business. Now it's on me because it's my business.
Yeah.
So I would take a step back from the lab and then focus more on the business end of things. Like if you weren't making money, you weren't breaking even, you know, we're having a hard time keeping the lights on, I would focus more time on that because we want to keep that alive. You know, we want to keep that growing.
So another question I have is, you were saying earlier how Long is the face of the business of bad taste, right? And he's good at social media and things like that. And we were talking before the show started about how you're not a fan of posting on social media, but for any business, it's like, I don't want to say it's evil, but like if you're not into it, it's necessary evil for you because like that's how things get promoted. That's how you advertise. That's how you build your brand nowadays because that's what it is, right? That's the medium. For you, that's not naturally interested in it. You know, is there a benefit to being because there's like a lot of like different business duos and stuff where I think like the sexy part is being the face.
Yes.
But I think people don't recognize the advantages of not being the face. So like what advantages do you think you have of like not having to be the face of the brand?
No one knows that I'm, you know, behind the scenes, which is
except now.
It's nice because, you know, when we go out, you know, when Long and I go out, like whether to a bar or a restaurant or whatever it is, some people will approach him because they recognize him on social media. He's almost like a little local celebrity right around the Providence area. You know, I'm more than happy to just kind of, you know, let him take that limelight because, you know, I like being behind the scenes, you know, like maybe that's why I gravitated towards the lab too, because being in the lab, you're kind of behind the scenes. No one really knows what you do. You just give results to the physicians and, you know, the physician now gives the results to you. So like a lot of that work is behind the scenes and you don't know who's behind there, and that, you know, that you don't know is me.
Do you think that can also like affect like well, I hate the term work-life balance because I feel like that's like almost an impossibility in a sense. Like I think it's more just like work-life bleed or blend.
Yeah.
But do you think that affects that too? It's like, hey, I don't have to be I still get the benefits of running this business and like getting the revenue from it, but I don't have to be the face of it.
Yeah. That takes a lot of energy, you know, to put yourself out there. You know, basically you're allowing people to, whether you do something good or bad, now you're now the target of whatever it is, you know.
Because like I always joked with friends because I'm into like music and DJing and making music that, you know, I'm like, everybody out here wants to be like Pharrell. when it comes to like the Neptunes. But I'm like, I'd rather be like Chad, because Chad gets the benefit of being in the Neptunes. Like, he's getting all the millions of dollars of making those hit records. And like, just because you don't see him like Pharrell, don't think the dude's not rich. He gets to go to all the if he wants to. He gets to go to all the Grammy parties and the cool shit. But then like the dude can still go to the record store and nobody bothers him. Like, if you're really into music, you know who Chad is. There's probably somebody listening right now.
I'm Chad.
Yeah, you're Chad. But I think there's a benefit to that of like you get to just like, you get the benefits, but like you don't get some of the negatives of being the face and putting things out there, because that is the quote unquote sexy part. But I think there's like a cost to that. Like, again, like Pharrell can't go to like Pharrell can't go to the record store. Like, if he does, he has to have like a security team and shit. I guarantee Chad can walk down the street and go to a record store and like not gonna get hounded. And he's just like, whatever.
Just a guy that's buying stuff.
Unless like you're a DJ really into music, like you may hound him, but he's not gonna be like, oh my, like it's not gonna be like paparazzi going, oh my god, it's Chad from the Neptunes. You know, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, unless he's wearing a t-shirt.
Yes, or a Star Trek t-shirt or something. You know, but I think that I think sometimes people don't think about that, and there's like a benefit to doing that.
There's a term that I like to use: ninjas move in silence.
There you go.
That's what it is.
And so, leading to my to another question I have is, what advice would you have? So, like, maybe somebody does have a great idea for a business, or like, and they know they can make the business happen, but they don't want to deal with being the face, because that's a whole other undertaking that they may not be good at. Like, you know, you may have this great idea for a business, and like you could do all the process stuff, but like you're just not good at like marketing or just putting yourself out there, maybe because like that's not in your personality. And I don't think you should have to force people to do something outside their personality, because I think it shows, right?
Yes, it does.
So like, should they find somebody to partner with? Should they hire somebody? Should they should they just make up a character?
I was actually just going to mention that they can make up a persona and just, you know, create an icon that they can use as their, you know, their business. So, you know, it doesn't have to be, Thoney, you know, Thoney's Inc. or whatever it is, or Thoney LLC. And it can be just like, you know, like just an image that you can post up there, and, you know, you can use that as your
avatar.
Platform. An avatar. Perfect. And, you know, that's one avenue. Another one is to just hire someone. There are people out there who are amazing at this, and they enjoy it, and they do it for, you know, really, you know, big companies as well.
Do you think that there's because, you know, we were talking about not going into the business full bore. Do you think there's advantages sometimes of like running a business that may not necessarily be your passion? Because I think sometimes, like, if it is your passion, and then again, like you run the risk of like, I don't want to say ruining the passion, but now it's because it's a business, like that thing that was fun that you're passionate about, that becomes like not being fun. So is there, or sometimes maybe like you're like, you know, like the painting or whatever, the picture is like 2 inches away from your face. Do you think that like by not being like, not going full bore or not being 100% passionate about the business that you're running, do you think there's an advantage in that, in the sense of like you can take an objective step back and look at something? Whereas if you're passionate, you may not want to face that truth.
You become almost blinded by it, and you don't see the real truth. So it allows you to really, like you said, step back and see the bigger picture and think of things objectively and logically to solve problems. Because if you're too much emotionally vested into something, once your emotions are involved with something, it's really, really difficult, almost impossible. Some say impossible to, you know, work things out logically if you're too emotionally invested.
Do you know, and you're doing all these different things, you're wearing all these different hats. You know, you could say you can switch gears.
Yes.
But not everybody can switch gears quickly. So how do you switch gears? Like, what is your process of switching gears and switching gears quickly? And do you ever experience burnout? And if so, like, how do you deal with that?
Why I'm able to kind of switch gears quickly is I learned how to meditate at a very young age. I think
I'm guessing also the Jeet Kune Do and everything else.
Yeah, just being in the moment. Jeet Kune Do, it's, you know, a very in the moment art. And also growing up Buddhist, and staying at the Buddhist temple, I learned how to meditate at a very young age. And I continued to, you know, meditate. And even in between classes, like say if I go from a Jeet Kune Do class to a Kali class, which is the Filipino knife and stick fighting art, before I jump right into the Kali class, I'll actually sit by myself for about 5 minutes just to kind of reset everything. And then, you know, kind of let go of what I just did in Jeet Kune Do, and then just go into the Kali class with a blank slate, ready to learn.
And so, you know, again, I hate the term work-life balance. I think work-life blend is more of a better thing. And it seems like you've got that down.
I do.
what advice or like what do you do that these things like blend into each other, but they do so in a beneficial way? It's not like work life, like, because like the reason why I like saying blend instead of bleed is like work life bleed, and it's more of a negative connotation. Like they shouldn't be crossing over into each other, but it seems like these things cross over into each other in a way that's beneficial to you, like the virology. They're like, and do you think that that's possible for everyone? Do you think it's just more of a perception thing? Do you think it's more of like taking an inventory and being like, how does this help this? Or do you think maybe like sometimes it's not going to be possible and you have to close certain things off?
I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the mindset. If you believe you can do something, as cliche as this sounds, if you believe you can do something, you can really set your mind to achieve those goals. If you're really down to to do it, to accomplish it. And like training in martial arts and powerlifting and all that, it puts you in these stressful situations where a lot of people aren't used to operating in those environments. In jiu-jitsu, we're put into positions where people are literally trying to choke the life out of you, like prevent you from breathing. And if you can still fight through that and escape and, not get tapped out, like things like business and things like, someone cutting you off in traffic, it doesn't really phase you like in your regular life.
Yeah, because you're just like,
whatever.
The guy cut me off.
Yeah.
Like,
whatever.
Yeah. What advice would, with everything that you've learned and gone through, is there anything you would tell maybe like 15, 16-year-old you?
Always be true to yourself and always follow whatever your interests are. There was the reason why I say that is there was a time in my life where I kind of questioned all my passions. Someone made me believe that for a fleeting moment, it was a weak point in my life, I guess you would say. Someone made me believe that all of my passions that I have were very childish and almost like I should grow up and, basically become an adult. And if I was to talk to, my 15-year-old self right now, I would tell them to ignore that person and just do your thing.
Well, I think we're also in an amazing time that like those things that are considered like immature, adolescent or whatever, like you can make money playing video games now.
Yes, you can.
You can make money. Like years ago, you didn't have the option of like, I'm really into Ghostbusters. Like, unless you worked on the next Ghostbusters movie or like worked within that franchise on the toys or something, you weren't going to make money. But now you can like start a Ghostbusters podcast,
yes, you can,
and become like the leading authority on Ghostbusters, and like not overnight, but like possibly get sponsorship money or get invited to cons or like
absolutely,
that didn't exist before. So I think now, especially now, like that thing that might seem odd or immature, like. Again, this is the whole specializing and not specializing. Yeah. Like you could specialize it, but then if that thing goes out of style or whatever, then like you're kind of in trouble. But you can make money on that thing.
You can.
And you couldn't do that before.
No.
We're in a very interesting time in human history. Yeah. Like we're so lucky, even with everything going on in the world right now. Like the fact that we can just do this. Like
you would have sit down here and have a
talk
podcast
and then publish it, and it's out in the world. Yeah. Like before you had to go through like radio station stuff like that. Now I can like literally just hit a button and it's out there.
Uploaded.
Yeah. And it's just, there's a lot more to sift through now. Hopefully you find this show as you're sifting through stuff. And if you do, I appreciate it. Thank you. But like, you couldn't do that before.
No.
All right. We're at the end. I think this is a good way to end it. Influences. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I've stolen this from Hot Ones. Hot Ones.
The Hot Ones.
Complex. Please don't sue me. I'd like to be a guest on Hot Ones. Actually,
I'd
like to see how many wings I can get through.
Some of those hot sauces are. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I'd have to take insurance out on mine for my body after going through that.
Quick thing. One of the MMA gyms I train at, we have the entire lineup for the different seasons of Hot Ones. So if you ever want to, try, should come by.
Can I sign a waiver that says I am not held responsible for whatever happens in the bathroom after? I feel like that's fair.
We're totally fine with that.
I feel like that's fair. And just like, have a medic on call. I mean, I know you're a doctor, but you're not like the immediate medic doctor. I'm
not a doctor, but I am.
You're a virologist, yes, and you're like, know enough.
Yes,
like, I think Jason might be dying. Might have to get an ambulance.
Some hot sauce.
He's dead, Jim. There we go, nerdy reference.
Yes.
So in the tradition that I stole from Hot Ones, you didn't have to eat any wings for this. the floor is yours.
All
Whatever
right.
you want to promote, whatever you want to talk about, whatever you want to like put out there as a way to end it. The floor is yours. Go for it.
All right. So, if you ever want to, train with me, I train at the Daring Academy of Martial Arts. I teach Jeet Kune Do there, Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. So, if you ever want to learn about Bruce Lee's philosophy and the benefits of, what it did to my life, feel free to hit us up there. Also, my personal IG is Phalanx, at Phalanx at IG. Phalanx spelled with a 1 instead of an L. So you can follow my, my...
Actually, just spell it out completely.
Oh, sure. It's at PHA number 1 ANX. So at Phalanx. It's kind of a play in my, last name. And also it was these evil guys in the X-Men and also, the movie 300, they fight in a Phalanx. So that's another reason
Seems
why.
like some leet speak in there with the 1 as well.
Exactly. You have to. That nerdy stuff. And yeah.
Well, with that, Vongsi Sampan, Thoney Phanlak.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on.
It's just been a blast.
Talking about your whole wild ride and being the we'll rephrase it, the most interesting nerd in the world.
Interesting nerd.
The most interesting nerd in the world. That's I'm gonna put that as the episode title.
Hell
that's
yeah.
gonna be the episode title. The most interesting nerd in the world. And then that way, when somebody comes and challenges me, the whole one, you can challenge them to a fight to the death. I think that'd be entertaining.
Yes.
Maybe not to the actual death, but
But there'll be rules.
Yeah, it'll be like Bloodsport where there's sort of rules.
Yeah, sort of rules. I won't throw anything in your eyes. No salt in your eye.
Yeah. We'll do that. But then the controversy will create cash for me, and then more people listen to the show.
Perfect.
Beneficial for everybody.
Excellent. I love it.
And then we'll premiere our own podcast on God knows what. Talking about gut checking nerds, I guess, or something.
Let's go.
But anyway, thank you so much for coming
You're
on.
welcome. Thanks for having me, man.
Until next time, everybody.
For sure.
Keep on creating. And that's it for this episode of The Creative Capital Show. Thank you for listening, and a special thanks goes to this episode's guest, Thoney Phanlak. The Creative Capital Show is hosted, recorded, edited, mixed, and produced by me, Jason Sylvia. You can listen to The Creative Capital Show over at our website, creativecapitalshow.com. We're also available on Anchor FM, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all other major podcast hosting platforms. If you like the show, please subscribe. Helps the show out a lot. And be sure to follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I hope you enjoyed the show, and until next time, keep on creating.